us like how you got into intimacy coordinating and just like who you are and all the many things you do, that would be great.
Awesome. So my name is Chels Morgan. My pronouns are they, them. Uh, I am an intimacy coordinator for film and television and also an intimacy director for theater, which is just a slightly different variation on the role for live performance. I'm also an ASEC certified sexuality educator and an NAEP certified social justice and liberation educator, which essentially means that I teach justice-centered sex education and consent education, and social justice education is just like where my foundation is. And I bring that into my work in the field of film and television. Um, I also do, work as a director and uh, in the camera department, and so I have experience like with all of the different parts of like what makes the film industry what it is, and so I try to like see how I can apply my justice and consent-based work to all of those different departments and to make the set overall a more consent-based space.
Yay. And what made you decide to be an intimacy coordinator director?
Yeah, so it kind of just like happened to me. I think I was working in theater and in circus actually before the pandemic. And I've always kind of like moved in a consent-based way and thinking about how we can like do more to respect them and their bodies and the way that they contribute to the art. Um, and then the pandemic happened and that shut down. And so I was virtually focusing heavily on my sex education and social justice work because it was something that I could continue doing during the shutdown. And then somebody contacted me and was like, "Hey, do you do this? Because I I have heard of it, and it just seems like something that you would already know how to do." And I was like, "I don't even know what you're talking about. This makes no sense to me." And so I went and I found out, and I found mentors, and I found training programs. Took a lot of different courses and added people on Facebook that I had no business adding on Facebook and just messaged them. And I was like, can we set up a Zoom? I know that you charge people for this. I don't have any money to offer you, but I would really love a Zoom. And so many of them just said yes for absolutely, like just because I guess it was just meant to be part of my journey. So I was able to get mentored by some of the incredible, leaders in the field, like Ann James, and to be like speak one-on-one with people like Alicia Rodas, and who is the head of intimacy coordination at HBO, or at least, yeah, still is, was at the time. Anyway, but yeah, I was able to just like really speak from to these incredible educators who were doing this out in the world and also trying to like bring more people into the field. Um, and just kind of get involved with bringing racial justice and accountability into the field from the ground up. So yeah, it just kind of all fell together.
That's awesome. And I'd love to know, like, from your perspective, at least, because I feel like there could be a few different answers, but like, when should like a director or a studio or a producer bring on an intimacy coordinator? And do you feel that it should just be used for just like intimate scenes, or is there value in having one just available on set, even for just like maybe platonic chemistry and things of that nature?
Yeah, so to the first part, when you should bring it on is when you bring on all your other department heads. I think that the issue with intimacy and also stunt, honestly, sometimes is it's often left to like, oh, we're shooting that scene next week. Okay, someone get somebody on the phone to help us out. When I think it's really useful to bring on an intimacy professional at the beginning when you're like dreaming up what this project would look like you're dreaming it up with your DP and with your wardrobe team and with your production designer, and you're like really creating this world. I think intimacy should be a part of that because that talks about like that brings into question, how these scenes are going to look, how they're going to be shot eventually, and like you know, what we really want to put into the script and what we envision being a part of the final product. So I feel like um, also helping with like casting and making sure the cast understands like the fullness of what you want them to do, and what type of story you're telling. So I think as early as you bring in everyone else is my answer, and not a second after that. Um, the second there's intimacy in your script is that's when you should be thinking about it. And I think as far as like when you should bring it in, I think that obviously yes, when there's a sex scene, when there's an intimate scene, I also consider like medical intimacy or a nudity in any way. I think about like scenes with children, if like there's a child, like a father bathing his child, or just a parent bathing their child, or if they're just um, you know, conversations around body autonomy in general, like intimacy coordinators can really help. If there is, yeah, so just thinking about just scenes of hyper exposure and hyper vulnerability. But yeah, like you said, if there's like platonic intimacy, if there's friendship, if there's like, something queer platonic that you're trying to establish, like somebody with that mindset is always going to be able to help. So, uh, definitely thinking about that is crucial.
Yeah, and I would like to know too, like, how does one, because I feel like SAG made it an official thing, or they're trying to at least, make it a thing that we have intimacy coordinators on set majority of the time, and that everybody's paid what they should be paid, all that jazz. Like, how do people like vet? And I say vet because I feel like it's become really popularized now that there's this, kind of accountability in the union to have these people. Now everybody kind of wants to get into it, but not everybody necessarily puts in the work that should be, I guess, required to create, like you said earlier, the safe spaces. So I guess from my perspective as like a producer director, I mean, I work with Chels anyways. I mean, I have Chels, so I can't speak for everybody, but like how would people like basically when they take a meeting or approach an intimacy coordinator, what should they ask? Like, do you feel certain training is a must, or like can people just kind of pop up on set and say they can do this thing, or like what's your kind of thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about this. First and foremost, like, no, you can't just pop up on set. I'm an advocate for there's no such thing as saying like I want to be an intimacy coordinator and then doing that in a few months and just popping up. I don't think that that's a safe thing to do for not only just people on set, but also for your emotional safety. There are things that are going to come up that are going to like you need to learn how to take care of yourself in heightened situations and to know how you're going to react to things as well. Um, so there's that. I think that there's a lot of questions around like certification versus qualification, and do people need to be certified? The answer is no, because there is no like accreditation body that SAG has endorsed or accredited certain intimacy training programs, but that doesn't invalidate the other ones that exist. Um, those programs are a great place to start to get some of your qualification like requirements, and SAG-AFTRA has a list on their website about things like anti-racism training, understanding LGBTQ intimacy, the logistics around like masking and camera and like how to work on set. um, I've worked with a lot of different educational bodies, and I'm also currently on the syllabus board of um, an educational body, and I don't think I'm on the website yet, but I will be very soon. So I don't know, check out my Instagram, I guess. But creating training programs that like really cover like not only sexuality education, but gender, race, disability, like educating on what intimacy looks like in that context, all of the ins and outs of choreography and all the ins and outs of like consent at every step of the way. But then there's also like legal logistics. Like there's a lot more to learn than just being on set and being an advocate and choreographing. Like that's one part of of a much larger role. Like things like HR and contracts and nudity writers and unions and just a bunch of stuff that at the very least logistically you need to understand on top of all of the different scenarios that could come up, and knowing if you're equipped for it. And so I think that that's, as far as questions that could be asked, like obviously ask them like, what training have you had, do you have these areas covered? And give me an idea of like what type of like consent, sexuality education, anti-racism training you've done. Um, but also, thinking about like, okay, like what, you know, what is your experience? Like, how would you approach this particular topic? And just kind of like feeling it out, user intuition, understand that like if someone can't explain to you like an overview of what their process is from start to finish, it might be because they're in the process of building it, which is great, and they can do that, but they might not be able to do that on your set. Or that they just don't know. And it's a lot more than just like, well, we're going to have a rehearsal and we're going to choreograph. Like, there should be something a little bit more, a little bit deeper than that in their response.
Yeah, no, that's great. And You mentioned several times, which I know what you mean by it, but the anti-racism training, like how does that apply to intimacy coordinating? Because I feel like a lot of people don't even think about that. Like they're just trying to think about an intimacy coordinator. Now we're thinking about these other areas. Like how do these other areas such as that like apply to intimacy coordinating?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think on a very basic level, you're going to walk on a set and you have no idea who you're going to encounter. And so understand, and you don't know what their experiences are, you don't know what their trauma is like. Um, so one understanding that like anti-racism training is just basic human and consent training. That's like understand that's the basics of like when I walk into a room, no matter who's in that room, I'm going to be equipped to have a conversation with them that doesn't harm them, that there's not going to be any intentional microaggressions. And if there is a microaggression, I'm going to know how to engage with that and to apologize intentionally and to like repair that relationship. So one's just about like, I mean, that should be embedded because it's so embedded in our society. It should be embedded in everything you do. On the other hand, there's also like racialized like intimacy, and there's like concerns that are different in different communities. Like if I'm choreographing a scene between two Black people, it is going to look different than if I'm choreographing a scene versus Latina people. I'm using my two identities as like an example. Like we move different, we act different, we engage with each other differently. Our power dynamics are different. There are different. Like I'm not going to tell you to put your hand in a Black woman's hair and to pull it in this situation. I'm going to say, hey, is that in the script for a particular reason? Okay, if it's in the script, great, cool, we can keep it there. The actress consented to that. But does she have a weave in? Does she have a sew in? Is she natural? Is the character wearing any rings? Like I have to, as an intimacy coordinator, ask a lot more questions because of like the cultural implications on the scene than I would if the cultures were different. Um, and so having that training helps you so that in that scenario, if you're just thrusted into that, you know to ask those questions.
Yeah, no, that's so great. I love that that exists. And that you brought it up too so naturally because it's something too. I remember when I even started hearing about intimacy coordinators, that all made sense. And then now, like you said, they're like listing like there's like first aid training, there's anti-racism training, there's I think like how to resolve like trauma training, like things like that. So it's super interesting just hearing how, like you said, everyday stuff that like we all encounter or maybe have experience with like comes into play on screen. And so I wanted to actually talk about, because something, I mean, that I do with you is like you help read and review the scripts and like make them as authentic as possible. I'd love to know, because obviously you're also a writer and director, like how has intimacy coordinating like helped you with your own career and then also collaborating with other people that you kind of understand that area maybe better than some people that are just intimacy coordinators and that don't necessarily have the writing background or whatever. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think it's like a difference because I've worked with like a couple and that's why I love working with Chels because it's like certain things you don't even think about or like when you're on set and like at least for me as like a second time director when we worked together it was like I'm gonna let this Chels call cut on this like we kind of have a good grasp but all that to say like how does your writing process I guess work within like when you're doing projects for intimacy coordinating.
Yeah, for sure. I think when it's my project, I think first for starters, you talked about how like when you were first like writing and you were thinking about sex scenes, like that discomfort that comes up of like, oh, I'm asking like this isn't just like a fictional story, a short story that I'm writing. These are real bodies that and real people that I'm asking to like do these things. And I think for one, it like puts me at ease because even if I don't have the answers to what I'm writing about, I know that those answers are out there and that there's ways to do this without it being harmful. So it opens up my mind to what I can write about, to the topics. And like as a social justice educator, I want to write about sex work. I want to write about um like trauma and I want to like put that into my work. And I feel like having this background of knowledge like helps me to do that and to do it in a detailed way that would be easy for an intimacy coordinator to read and say, okay, I'm ready to choreograph. And so that way like my vision can come to life a little bit more when I'm working. And that's also to say that when I'm directing, I do hire out somebody to do that. Like I'm not volunteering myself to do two jobs. I can't do two jobs. They are not the same thing. And I do need someone to advocate like to me on behalf of my actors as well, because I'm in 100 different places when I'm directing. Um, but also like if I'm on the opposite vein, if I'm doing a script consultation with a director and I'm helping them to write or to like think about the intimacy in their story, which is a service that some but not all intimacy coordinators also are able to do because of their other talents. Um, I am just thinking like, okay, as a writer and also as an intimacy coordinator, like what information do we need? If your script says they have sex, I'm gonna say like, how long does this last in your head? And they're gonna say like a minute, 2 minutes. And I'm like, okay, well then how do we make this scene 2 pages? These 3 words, like how do we make them 3 pages? If that's how long you want the interaction. And so then we get to like ideate and think about it and just say like, oh, well, I imagine this person taking control. I'm like, okay, so let's write that. I imagine it being in this environment, in this position. I'm like, okay, so let's write that. Here's the language that I can give you to like make sure that what you're envisioning actually comes to life in the end, and then the actors can see it in their head as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. I wanted to ask too, because there's a lot of indie filmmakers out there. I encountered this myself last year, but like, what are your, I guess, like suggestions or advice for people that maybe they want to have an intimacy coordinator, but they can't afford an intimacy coordinator? Like, what's a way, I guess, that they could either research or like how to set up their set for success for doing certain scenes if that's not something that they actually can get, maybe?
Yeah. Well, honestly, there are a lot of us at the top of this field, like all the way up to studio level, that because we want to advocate for more people having us, like if our bank account is set up that way, we might be willing to take a pay cut or to, I'm not going to volunteer anybody to work for free because as a Black person, I don't put that into the universe. But there might be somebody out there who does put that into the universe, and you could talk to them and not me because that's not me. But I will just being honest. But
Dr. Morgan.
yeah, like, I have recommendations for you. I'm just not one of those people. But there are very generous people out there who are willing to donate their services. So there's that. We also have like trainees and people who are looking for experience who have gone through all of the like basic training, like the anti-racism, the trauma training, the LGBTQ intimacy. They've done all of that and have this breadth of knowledge that's incredible, but they just don't know how to get themselves the hours of experience on set to apply it, right? So those people are perfect to go up to of saying like, hey, one, ask the same questions. They should have the same training and be just as qualified as someone with a wealth of experience, but they're just trying to get those hours up. So contacting training programs and saying like, hey, do you have any like people who are almost done with your cohort or who you really trust that are great students that will do a great job that are willing to come on my set, um, and 9 times out of 10 you'll get a wealth of great responses. So there are options available to people who are both qualified and also potentially in need of experience.
Yay. Yeah, no to free work. But I wanted to ask too, for people that want to start an intimacy training, where do you suggest they start? Or are there like certain programs or people that you like heavily recommend, like, hey, like check this out, try this out, in terms of starting their certification journey and all that?
Yeah, for sure. So there are certification programs. There are also like qualification or accreditation programs. What's right for you just depends on your learning style. You don't need like having one organization stamp approval over another is not going to get you, better information or more work or less work, honestly. Um, but they're like starting with SAG's website, the list of accredited intimacy programs. Who I know the people on every single one of them, and there are incredible people who run these programs, and they were vetted and placed up there for a reason. Um, I'm gonna plug the Intimacy Professionals Education Collective because that's the one that I'm building the syllabus for. And that is an accreditation program that has not released. We have not released things yet. So if you're looking to do it now, just stay tuned. But also there are a lot of other programs like Cintima, and if you're in Canada, there are programs or principal intimacy professionals. There are key intimate teams in Australia. So like there are options for you, and they're all incredible. So please just do your research and find the price point that works for you because they're all at different price points that range.
Yes, I didn't know you were doing that. You gotta send me the stuff when you do it and all that because I want to check it out. But I wanted to ask because I was like, I would be remiss if I didn't ask. So obviously it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Um, I obviously write a lot of content like that because you read my stuff. But I wanted to ask from like an intimacy coordination perspective, like when you do get tapped to do like these scenes, if you don't mind sharing, like what are some things that you would recommend to like writers, directors, to be mindful of when writing them? Because I think a lot of us write from personal, obviously, experiences. So finding that balance between not trying to traumatize but make your point, I think can get blurred sometimes unintentionally. So I would love if you would speak to that or give like your best advice to that.
Yeah. I think that like really genuinely the biggest thing when you're writing is what is your final intention? Like what like really focus on that. And although like maybe you're trying to like showcase a really dark situation, but that doesn't mean that the entire situation needs to happen on screen for us to like witness with you. Well, how much information does the audience need to know what happened? And are you trying to show to people who need more information, who don't know about this topic as much, or who have not experienced it? Or are you trying to do this as like something that's like message to survivors and said like, hey, I understand your experience and I'm here with you? Because if that's your goal, if you're targeting it toward people who've experienced this and want to empower them, less is more. I think that it takes even just like a look or a hint for a survivor to know that you're one of us, you know? So I think that really think about who your audience is, what is your intention, what would you be comfortable seeing if you were sitting? Because sometimes it gets disconnected between what you would be comfortable witnessing versus what you're trying to create or recreate. And also, what are you comfortable just sitting there and directing? Like, and that's why I think it's important to think about like what intimacy coordinator you hire. You might work with one that you absolutely love and that is wonderful, but doesn't have the specific training in trauma and violence. And uh, so it might be time to go with somebody else who can hold, you know, both your mental health, the actor's mental health, and like we're not therapists. We cannot hold your mental health in a way that like a therapist might. But there are also mental health professionals that can be brought on set. Like, what support do you need to be there? And so I do work with because of my background in trauma and social justice and sexuality education, I do work a lot with survivors and assault scenes. So I list like non-consensual scenes as one of my specialties because I know that I have the tools to support a set who is talking about that. Um, but be really candid and honest because some intimacy coordinators do not want to put themselves in a position to be choreographing something so traumatizing. Um, both maybe even for their own mental health, you know? So I think it's just like just consider your own bodily reactions and what you'd be experiencing and also who you're bringing on set. Consider your DP. Last time I did a scene about sexual assault, I checked in on the DP and I was like, "Hey, you've been filming this for like," and I was just like, "Are you okay?" I checked on the first AC because they're just like pulling focus to these things, and they're like, "I'm sorry, I've just considered myself the camera. Like I never considered being asked about that, but like hiring somebody as your intimacy coordinator who knows to check on the crew and to knows to like hold the entire space is so crucial." Um, and making sure that like, you know, who you hire for those positions is aware that there is assault in the script and that they have to be witnessing that. Um, so yeah, that's my advice. Just like covered, like really be thorough in terms of vetting everybody and letting them know what your goals are for this.
Yeah, no, that is definitely super true. I wanted to ask, so because I realized I didn't ask about this earlier when we were talking about the racism stuff. For like LGBT training, I wanted to know your thoughts as well. Because I don't know, maybe I have very rigid views, but I still am one of those people. I do feel like queer intimacy coordinators should be priority in doing queer scenes
Mhm.
versus, straight. I wanted to know kind of like what training and stuff that I guess you've experienced or you know of that people go through that for that, aside from just being a part of the queer community. and how you personally see it benefited on like screen versus like through, I guess, a straight lens is the best way I can put it.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of like organizations, either sexuality education organizations or like the company that I got my social justice certification from, Ania Professional Development. They have a couple of different courses on queer intimacy and queer bodies. There's Embody Emerge, which has a gender inclusion certificate. I said those words wrong, but there's stuff like that. So there are like formalized education that I think even queer people should go through because like I'm queer in my way and not in everyone else's way, you know? So there's a lot of information to take in there. But you know, there is as far as like non-queer people choreographing queer scenes, I'm always an advocate for no, like one, refer because the opportunities that queer people have are limited. And so if we can't work on our own projects, then sometimes that means we don't get to work. And I'm looking at you people who are taking, like non-queer people, non-black people, like non-people of color who are taking these roles. I'm looking at you wondering why. Just why. Um, and if you have an answer to that question, great. You're the only option, cool. But just asking that why. But also like, you know, like for example, I'm a transmasc, non-binary, pansexual person. That's a lot of things, a lot of words that, may mean something to you or may not. But like how I carry myself with one gender versus another in a sexual situation, where I want my body touched, how I want my body touched. Those are like really specific and personal experiences that get my brain thinking about, let me ask that question to another person actually before I tell you to do that. Um, there's body language, there's social cues, there's like ways that our voices and bodies change when we're uncomfortable that like is innate within us and within the community that it's hard to learn. Like you can see it and learn it and experience it as much as possible, but if you don't have that like queer intuition, it's difficult to like catch. So I think about all of those things and you know the ways in which we communicate non-verbally. And so I encourage you to find someone who shares at least a similar identity to the intimacy you're creating, because I think it can only add depth.
Yes, you're preaching. It's not even Sunday. You're preaching, Dr. But I mean, thank you so much. Where can everybody find you, hire you, etc.?
Yeah, you can find me my website, my Instagram. It's all MXC Morgan, which is my initials, Mix C Morgan, or mxcm.art if you want to see some like pictures and some fun like visual arts that I do. You can message me on Instagram. You can message me through my website. You can email me mxcmeducation@gmail. I'm pretty, accessible. You can Google me, Google my name, as some would say, Chels Morgan. Um,
It popped
and yeah,
up number one. I've done it. It's right there, the
great.
website.
I've been working on it, so popping up first.
SEO,
So,
yes. It's
uh,
working. But I appreciate you. Thanks so much for taking the time and safe travels.
thank you.
I'll text you later. All
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
right. Bye.
Later.